Better Preach, Episode 51, How to Equip Others to Give Talks. Welcome to Better Preach, a podcast for Catholic leaders on developing and delivering great Catholic talks. I'm your host, Ryan O'Hara, a 25-year vet of college and young adult ministry. Thanks for inviting me into your journey of communicating the true, the good, and the beautiful. For many of us, a big challenge we have in ministry is not developing and delivering talks ourselves, but rather it's being confident that we have an effective plan to help others develop and deliver talks. For many years, and I'm kind of ashamed to admit this, I took the easy way out. Like, let's say there'd be a retreat coming up, and I'd sort of have talks that would be assigned to others, and I just sort of wind them up and let them go. Almost no supervision, oversight, and very rarely any feedback. But about 10 years ago, I knew that something had to change, and I began developing a way of engaging others in developing and delivering talks from start to finish. And that's what I want to talk about today. I'm joined again by my occasional and trusty co-host, Connor Flanagan, and we dive into the 4 stages of equipping others to give talks. There's a PDF download if you'd like to follow along or you want to catch up afterwards what we talked about. There's a link in the show notes. So would love for you to check that out. If this podcast has been helpful to you, I'd love for you to share a written review and a rating on Apple Podcast or Spotify. And come by and say hi on Instagram. I'd love to connect there too, at Better Preach. Let's get into it.
Welcome back to Better Preach. I am your temporary interim host.
Occasional co-host.
Yeah. Connor Flanagan. Great to be here. Ryan, great to have you on your own show again.
It is great to be on
Thanks for making
the Better
time
Preach podcast.
For your podcast. So it's awesome when, not a lot of people make time for their own things, and you're doing it.
That's true.
So
that's true. I couldn't wait to connect.
I love talking with you about things. Obviously, all these topics that come up on your podcast are areas that you can speak from levels of extreme experience and professionalism, and or you're having guests on who are professionals in the space.
Yeah.
But this one today is going to be awesome because I have seen you. This is what you do. We're going to talk about equipping others to give talks. And bro, you eat this stuff for breakfast. You eat equipping others to give talks for breakfast.
Dude, I usually like grape nuts.
And dinner.
Yeah, grape nuts are awesome, but today we're eating that for breakfast.
Bro, this is what you eat for breakfast. And you're so good at it.
Thank you.
Your heart is just an overflow of who you are. I have seen you in the most intimate spaces of events, the smallest of events, the largest of events. The prep for events we work together on, as the biggest details are being planned, you are constantly praying through, worried about in a healthy way, more concerned about how are the presenters that we have lined up going to do, especially the most unequipped people, the testimonies that are between keynotes or that are before a worship time or after a worship time, or small group leaders, breakout sessions. Like you are so in the weeds and in the details about, are these people ready?
Yeah.
Because that is part of the experience of an event, right? Is who's presenting.
Sure.
Doesn't matter what room they're in or what stage they're on.
We've had a lot of good fortune. Like I kind of feel like it's a bit of a luxury, the role that I've been allowed to play, like in SPO over the last number of years. I've just gotten to focus on content.
Yeah.
And
amazing.
It's great to be a part of a bigger ministry and to get a job, with the title like content director.
Yeah.
That was like a dream, for me, where I just did get to focus on developing talks and helping to equip others to give talks. Sometimes we'd bring in pros, for conferences and things, but most of the time we're just equipping other, SPO missionaries, SPO staff to help deliver over time hundreds and hundreds of talks. So that's been an absolute blast, and a big challenge too, but an absolute blast.
But it's your wheelhouse, man. So I'm excited for people to learn from this today. Super practical episode. We're just going to break it down,
right,
and teach people how to do this well.
Yeah, based on kind of my experience over the last number of years. Yeah.
So you have 4 stages,
right,
of how to equip someone to give a talk. Maybe give some context. Who are we equipping?
Yeah. So I think let's say if you're a director, a DRE, director of religious education, you're a youth minister, director of adult faith formation, a priest, a deacon, religious, anyone who is leading, Catholic events, whether it's the weekly events that you might have for people in your parish, and you're asking volunteers or folks maybe with less experience than you to deliver content. So you're in your own journey of growing as a trusted, experienced communicator. And then oftentimes you have to also equip others who have less experience than you do. So how do you do that? You can't give every talk. You shouldn't give every talk necessarily. So you're gonna be inviting others with varying levels of experience to do a really important part of the job.
Well, and coming from a youth minister's perspective, I was in youth ministry for 8 years. I'm still involved in parish ministry in terms of when I interact with parishes to play shows. But when I was more intimately involved in it, if you build a program on your own skill set, it will fail.
Mm.
And I think
true.
something about this is speaking into that of like, hey, as you're equipping your core team, your volunteers, it's not only are you equipping them. I have found not only do you actually give them the practical tools to help give a presentation or a talk, but you're actually like changing their walk with the Lord, because you're helping them in the equipping process, which you're going to get into. You're helping them process what's God doing with your life.
Well, right. And what I found, I learn something best if I'm asked to teach about it.
100%.
So they're not only just learning the experience, kind of the art and science of communicating, they're actually having to wrestle with this content and figure out, how am I living this or not in my own life? So I find that that's a critical opportunity there too.
And when you give people leadership opportunities, there's buy-in. There's buy-in for the program, the ministry, the event, right? When you invite people into the fold. And so sometimes I've found, and I know you've seen this, where you may bring people in who are less caliber speakers, but it's actually more important because, with your help, they're going to give a good talk, but then you have their buy-in for what you're doing for years to come.
Right. I think we're kind of hitting on a lot of the pros, kind of multiplying your ministry through delegation and engaging others. But there's a con.
Yeah.
It's hard work. Like, it's actually harder if you're going to do it well.
Right.
You could do it poorly and it's not harder.
Yeah.
There'll be a long-term pain you'll experience.
Yeah.
Short-term gain. You gain a little bit of time back, but a long-term pain because they're not equipped, they're not ready to do it again. But it's also it's more work to invite someone in, especially to help them do it well. It's going to require more of you, not less.
Yeah. Well, we're getting into it. Let's start at the top.
Let's do it.
Walk us through these 4 stages. What are they?
Yeah. So I think the 4 stages, how I would think about it, is create, practice, day of, and feedback.
Okay.
So those are kind of the 4 stages: create, practice, day of, and feedback. So those would be the 4 stages of helping to equip someone else to give a talk.
All right, let's jump in. First one, create.
Create. This is something that will always happen. I don't always think practice and care, day of, and feedback happens, but create will.
It has to.
It has to. You have to have a talk.
Yeah.
And I think of it along a spectrum, depending on how experienced the person is. They are either on one end, where if they're the least experienced, you're giving them a talk, either one you've put together or that may be a trusted outside resource, Life Teen, Y Disciple, whatever, Ascension, whatever the kind of content creator that you find out there that you trust. And there's a lot of good ones.
So many.
You are on one end either giving them the talk, and on the other end, if they have more experience, they're writing the talk. So, but in between is usually probably what happens a lot is you're working together to kind of help create the material.
Yep.
And so that's the first thing I think to think about. Is this, do I need to literally give this person almost like full speaker notes? Do I need to give them an outline? How much do I need to give them? And then where do they have room to kind of make it their own? And I think no matter what, I think this is actually a key piece, whether it's given to them fully or they're writing it, themselves, one of the key things you want to make sure does happen is to show them where and how they can make it their own, so that the material is connected to them. That's an important piece, I think, in preparing others to give talks, that they find a way to give an analogy from their own life, maybe not just one that's written for them, or a story from their own life, sort of their experience with a particular scripture, that they can offer some of their own reflection as well.
And that's where the work comes in. It could be one small part, but that one small part, testimony, right? I mean, I've seen you coach hundreds of people on how to give good testimonies.
Right.
And it's a 3-minute slot that takes 6 weeks to prepare for.
It does.
Which is insane.
It is. And I start with I give them, just for a testimony even, I have them answer 9 questions.
Yeah.
3 kind of before the conversion, 3 during the conversion, and 3 after. And so I say, hey, answer all these 9 questions. We'll meet. And we're starting then to build even just a 3-minute testimony off of that work that they're doing. And it usually takes 3 or 4 meetings just to help them be ready for a big event where they're sharing their story well in, say, 3 to 4 minutes.
Yeah. Well, and I just want to affirm the gravity of that prep work, because if we actually believe in what we're doing, right, in the ministry space, salvation's on the line.
Mm-hmm.
Like genuinely. That testimony by the random, unprepared, unequipped core team member could be the door that the most uninterested middle schooler will start to walk through, right? Like that they could open that door to the gospel, that maybe because it's a new face, you're just the youth minister. You're gone for that night, whatever. They see a new face, so they perk up to listen one time. And because you spent 6 weeks prepping, you may touch the heart of that teen. It's worth it. It's worth it.
It is. I think what I've seen most of all is, I think there are some ways, there's two approaches. There's I'm giving you this opportunity and I'm giving you the material, kind of good luck.
Yeah.
Or any amount of effort that you put into accompanying them, supporting them, will pay off significantly.
Yeah.
And so I am stressing the point that it is more work, but even just beginning to change your habits around being more engaged rather than less.
Yeah.
I see significant improvement quickly. So in other words, you don't have to become a rocket science in the art and science of communication to be effective.
Yeah.
Just with a little coaching and a little support, it
being
can really
present,
go a long way.
Walking with them, right?
Yeah. And I think one practical tip in this is to use a common Google Doc.
Oh,
so
great.
Something that you can see real time where the talk is at.
Yeah.
You can add comments and you can see how things are adjusting. If it's a separate Word doc or something that's just on their computer or just on yours, having these collaborative tools are really critical. So that's a key piece of all of the prep that I'm doing with folks. There has to be a common Google Doc, and that's a great way to keep an eye on where things are at, but also to give comments and feedback. So use a collaborative doc like that, I think, to help. So that's the first step to create, but you have to make a decision. Where are they at on the spectrum? Find ways to collaborate and without micromanaging, but also help them know, tell them where they're at. Hey, this is new for you. I really want you to work with this script, and here's where I want to see you add some of your own thoughts.
Right.
That's one side. Then if the talk is really up to them to write, communicate that to them. Hey, I'd like for you to take a first stab at this. Here's kind of the goal of the talk. You put a first draft together, I'll give you feedback. So that's on the other end. So just be really clear about where they're at as their experience level and how the two of you will engage together.
I think that's so important. Clarity of expectations is huge. Great. 2, practice.
Right. This
practice?
Practice?
We talking about practice?
Here is where this is the difference maker. This, for me, if you're going to put all the work you're going to put into this as to creating and preparing it and not practice, to me, so much of the gains are lost or won right here, in my opinion. And what I would suggest doing, especially if they have less experience, but really whatever experience level, if it's a volunteer, set a time ahead, some days ahead. It's built into the plan. Like, I've asked you to give this talk. It's a month from now, 3 weeks from now, we're going to meet as a team.
Yep.
And you're going to practice your talk. The team of people who are speaking, we're all going to practice our talks.
Yeah.
This was a habit that we started to get into in SPO, and I saw overnight the difference of doing like an actual dry run. The idea was, we're going to be in a room, we're going to set it up kind of like it's the real thing. You're going to be up front, you're going to have your slides and your notes like you would. You're going to deliver your talk, and we're the audience. You're not going to pause and say, "Oh, I screwed that up." "Oh, I still need to work on this part." Sometimes
Right.
you give your own little commentary along the way if you're practicing something. No, deliver it like you're going to deliver it,
Yeah.
and from start to finish. And then we as a group will respond and give, real feedback in the moment. Of course, first start with what works well, and then dig into where they can improve.
Yeah.
But I have seen taking time to practice, not only, to me, it works out so many of the kinks.
Yeah.
And because nothing approximates the real thing like actually doing it. I can't see the real thing on paper.
Yeah.
You can have a great plan on paper, but you get up in front of a group and you can't bring that to life.
Yeah.
That paper is not doing us that great preparation is not doing us any good.
Yeah.
So taking time to practice, this is one of those things that's not urgent, but super important.
Oh man.
People, you will skip over this because there probably isn't a lot of extra time.
Right.
But if you build it in to the
Yeah.
process, like this is just part of it, just like we have to write it, we have to practice it,
Yep.
you'll see an incredible improvement year to year if you take time to do this. And I think make it fun, get some snacks.
Yeah.
Also, record the practice.
Yep.
So audio and video if you can, so you can share that with them. You'll see an incredible improvement from the time they practice to when they actually deliver it day of.
Well, and the biggest lie that or the biggest trap you can fall into in this is like, well, on the day of, I'll do it different or I'll do it better. Like, I don't know why, especially if you're not a pro, but even if you're a pro, you think that under pressure, you will all of a sudden it'll click.
Yeah.
Like, oh, well, when this is the real audience in the real situation in the real environment, I'll hit a home run.
Yeah. And I think it has to do with the leader setting the tone and the expectation to let them know that we want to approximate the real thing. Yeah, there's going to be many fewer people in the room.
Yep.
But a pro, an effective communicator, doesn't rely on whatever's in front of them.
Yeah.
And this is one of the things I've had to grow in. This
That's
is
a great
a different deal, but like learning to talk to a camera versus just to talk to a live audience. I'd rather talk to a live audience.
Yeah.
But I've had to learn how to, in a sense, create the same energy in front of a camera
Yeah.
as I do kind of when I'm giving a talk. And so I encourage, a lot of times you wouldn't be using a mic because you might be in a smaller room, but bring as much physical energy to the experience when you're practicing.
So good. All right. So we've created, we've practiced. It's go time. It's game time.
It's go time. And again, this is a time where I think people make one of two mistakes.
The day of.
Day of.
Yeah.
You're equipping others. You're helping others give their talk today or tomorrow for the weekend or whatever. You're either completely hands off,
Yeah.
kind of like, oh, I trust them.
We
It'll be
did the
fine.
work already.
You did it,
Yeah.
know, or you're micromanaging the thing and you're all over them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think right in between is an important balance.
Yeah.
I think number one, I want to let them know, hey, I love the plan. I feel really good. Do you have any questions last minute?
Yeah.
Anything you're still sort of working out. So kind of just checking in with them. Where are they? How do you feel? Offering to pray with them, either outside of before they go on, or right before they're able to share before a session starts. I think offering to pray with them is crucial. But also letting the talk be what it is.
Yep.
You've put in the work. Don't overwhelm them with more. Be available, pray with them, express confidence in them. And I try never to bring criticism about a talk during the event. That's a rule that I've asked others to do with me. We want to be able to process outside of an event as to what we can do better. But let's not evaluate and criticize the thing midstream.
Yeah.
It's hard to give talks like this. It's another thing to also deal with maybe disappointing someone or maybe not hitting the mark. And so there's just a lot of emotions there. So I really tried to withhold any kind of critique of a talk during an event. That's a principle that I hold on to.
Well, I love that because I think there's two elements to that. One is a deep trust in what God's doing in the event, right? Like believing that this person's testimony matters, or they're giving this talk for a reason, and he's going to use them to the best of his ability, right? But then also what this means for that person personally,
right?
I live by this, and it's probably to a fault sometimes, but like encouraging someone even into failure, because the important part isn't that they failed, it's that you were in it with them, right? Like and so day of, it may not be going everywhere you wanted it to go, but they will do better if they know you're going to go with them to that place rather than they know you're upset about it.
And I also think it's important that your hype, if you will, your encouragement does match reality.
Right.
And so I'm not going to say to someone, that was amazing, you totally crushed it, if they didn't.
Right.
And at least in my own estimation, I would say, you did a really good job today. Thank you for bringing that message. Thank you for your vulnerability. Whatever I can name.
Yeah, call it out. There's ways to affirm.
That's honest and that matches reality. I really try not to overpraise.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that's helpful, but I also really choose not to criticize as well. So I want my words in those moments to really match the reality, because what I'm also going to do, which is the next step, is I will meet with them to give feedback. So if I tell them they totally crushed it, and then I come back with something that doesn't feel like they totally crushed it, that's not helpful.
Right. So we've practiced, the talk has been delivered.
Yeah.
Probably the fourth and most overlooked part of the process
is feedback, is actual sit down with the person and talk with them about how it went, what worked well, and what they could improve. Most of you out there will choose to neglect this piece. The only reason I say that is because this was always the hardest piece for me to do well.
Yeah.
Actually, practice and feedback. These are the things that, because you're going to create the talk and it will happen. So the stage 1 to stage 3 are going to happen.
Yeah.
And I think you can do it better, each one of those. But the other two that are really in your court that you'll likely choose away from because there's not enough time.
Yeah.
It's important, but not urgent, is practice. And then of course, feedback.
Right.
Oh man, this is gold at the end. If you can take the time, they're craving it. They're dying for it. And again, they don't just want platitudes. We need to be able to be specific about what worked and what didn't.
Yep.
And if you're going to give good feedback, there's something critical that you have to be able to do. You have to have been present to what they delivered.
Right.
And you actually have to pay more attention than maybe anybody else in the room to be able to give them the feedback that they need, a week later. So the first thing I would say is do it while it's fresh.
Yep.
Schedule a time. just like you scheduled your practice, schedule a time. Ideally, there's a recording. I don't think you necessarily need to watch it or listen to it together,
Right.
but make it available to them in case they want to listen to it.
Yeah.
And you could ask them. I'd say that's up to you. Ask them to be sure to listen to it or not, but at least try to make it available if possible. That will really help prepare them. Because it's one thing to evaluate yourself as you're doing it. It's a whole other thing to learn from listening to or watching yourself.
Yeah.
So I think that's crucial, having that audio or video available. And then I think as you're getting into the conversation, they actually will probably be their greatest critic.
Yeah, they'll know.
They'll know. And so give them the first crack. What went well and what's something you need to improve on.
Yeah.
So give them, and then you build your comments around their comments. And I think you have to come ready with your remarks written out.
Yeah.
And again, there's a certain objectivity there. If you're gonna deliver some difficult feedback, to me, I just think it helps to have thought through how you want to say it, and to again show the person that you're ready.
Yeah.
You're not just talking off the top of your head, but you're like, hey, here are the things that I wrote down as I was experiencing the talk, and I just want to share with you my observations.
Yeah, I love that.
And I think there is a way in which, keeping it all in context, this is just two people's experience. We know that the Holy Spirit.
Oh, 100%.
This isn't about, is God moving or not? Yes, we do trust him. But how can we continue to grow and improve so that we avoid getting in the way of that movement more and more in the future?
Do you think that's important to acknowledge at the beginning of like the feedback meeting? And maybe it's more so important if it's going to be a more critical feedback meeting, but just like we know God worked, especially, I mean, a lot of these people probably are coming in I've worked with a lot of people who are very insecure. They're not professional speakers. They're doing this because they want to help their kid and their kids' friends, and or they feel guilty or they want to grow in their faith. Actually, I found most, at least in the youth ministry space, a lot of core team members are volunteering in the youth group because they don't want to vocally admit that they're the ones who actually want to grow in their faith.
Yeah.
And this is the space to do it. So there's probably a lot of insecurity there. How important is it to acknowledge, like, look, we know, like, God used this.
Yeah. I think I always model this super well, at least in my own heart and mind, but I want to value the person more than the presentation.
100%. Yes.
And to be able to affirm them, affirm the experience or challenge relative to where that person is at. And if we know that their ceiling isn't too high because they don't have a whole lot of experience, you're not going to bring the heavy guns.
Right.
You're going to help bring appropriate feedback based on where that person is at.
Person over the presentation. I love that.
When it comes to feedback. Yeah. And I also think in general too, we have to go, hey, there are two kinds of things that are happening here. There's content, but there's also a person who is taking a risk, a person who is stepping out, a person who's never done this before and is now. And I think valuing the person in that moment can really go a long way.
Yeah, that's so true. Well, I know you have 5 specific ways, 5 points for how to intentionally and specifically evaluate a presentation that somebody can walk through with their presenter, their volunteer. Would you mind walking us through those?
You always want to look at first, how did they start and how did they finish? So do a specific evaluation. What was your opener?
Yeah.
How did it go? Did it get people's attention? How did you finish? Did you have a good plan? Did you kind of stick the landing?
Yep.
So I think that's evaluation point number 1.
Yep. Number
2, you want to talk about attention.
Yep.
Did you keep people's attention? Was it a mixed bag? Were there points where you had them and points where you didn't?
Yeah.
What was the difference?
Yep.
And ask them, what did you experience from did it seem like people were leaning in versus sort of dozing off?
Right.
So I think paying attention to the beginning and the end, paying attention to attention.
Yeah.
How did that go? And then asking more questions around the content. And for me, it's around clarity. Were you clear and compelling? And I think those are two different things to evaluate. Were your points clear and understandable? Was it foggy?
Right.
Were you compelling? Were you making a strong case? Was it something that was moving people towards what you were talking about?
Yeah.
So that's the third piece on clarity. The next one is to talk about their mannerisms. Was there anything that they were doing or saying that was distracting?
Yeah. Playing with their phone, kind of, I don't know.
Yeah. Ums and ahs.
Yeah.
There's all of those kind of vocal tics. Maybe they have a phrase that they always use.
Yeah.
Or they're pacing the room. They're always doing something with their glasses. I don't know.
Yeah.
Just paying attention to any distracting mannerisms. And then finally, and I think this is what's really important, give them one thing.
Yeah.
If they could improve one thing about that talk, name it.
That's awesome.
And then go, if we were to do this again, if you made this one shift, I think this could improve.
At minimum.
Yeah. At minimum. Give them one thing that they can work on for the next time.
That's so good. So run us through just the 5 again, the names.
Evaluate your start and finish.
Yeah, number 1.
Evaluate how well they kept people's attention. Evaluate the clarity of their content.
Yeah.
Was it clear? Was it compelling? Evaluate mannerisms, anything distracting that they would say or do, and then share one way that they can improve. Just focus on one area.
When you said number 2, did it keep people's attention? Man, it just brought me back. Wednesday night middle school youth group. It reminds me of the importance of prepping them for the context in which the talk is being given.
Yeah.
In a 75-minute youth group session with middle schoolers specifically, it's like herding cattle until you can share 3 minutes worth of content.
Yep.
And so maybe all you end up evaluating is once you got their attention, how did that 3 minutes go? Or letting them know hey, you're going to give a 20-minute talk. You're only going to get 2 minutes worth of their time. Really.
Yeah.
So I think understanding the context, prepping them for the context so they don't feel because I've done that to people. I've thrown them into the fire and they're like, I had no idea that was going to be like that. Even though I thought I prepped them, but I never really told them, hey, while you're talking, the 5 kids in the back row are going to be fighting and you're going to have to discipline them. And these people are doing this and this and this, and that's youth ministry specific, but
that's actually anybody kind of, let's say 18 and younger.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an excellent point. And I think for a lot of folks out there, that is the general kind of audiences that you're speaking to.
Crowd control.
And so you not only have to be so clean on your content, you also have to manage the room.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And maybe make adjustments as a result.
Yeah.
And I think that's an excellent point. And now I'm trying to think about it in practice.
Yeah.
Could you have somebody in the back,
for sure,
waving flags and doing a weird dance or something?
Well, I mean, think about it. I was trained in terms of leading small groups. When you practice leading a small group, you have your other youth ministers. You're in the training session with play characters,
right?
You're the disruptive kid. You're the emotional kid. You're the one who always has to go to the bathroom, and it's I'm trying to manage these people. So it's
I love it. So I've been doing ministry with college students for the 25 plus years. So I haven't had to deal with as many of that, but having been in some of those scenarios, I totally get it. And it's a different bird altogether. Yeah. That's a great call out.
Well, and another thing I'll share is I think there's multiple ways to approach this. This is so methodical, and I think in a perfect world you're going through all 4 of these steps, you're given a lot of creative direction and intentional help with talk, practicing, day of all of these things. We talked before we started recording this episode. I took a 6-week paternity leave one time during youth ministry, and I tapped into some of those external resources you were talking about, and I was able to leave knowing I had fully prepped my core team to run the youth group for 6 weeks without me.
Yep.
And was every talk perfect? No, but there was a trusted source, there was trusted content, and I could go to my pastor in the parish at whole and say, I have stewarded this ministry well for my time away. Your kids are getting solid Catholic teaching, and when we come back, we'll pick it up where we left off. And that is building a program not around my own gifts, right? Trying to tap into the resources that are available to me and the core team, the external resources for content. And was it perfect? No. Was it overly dynamic and compelling? No, but it was true. Yep. It was real. It was consistent. And it really gave them ownership of the ministry, which was a fruit that I didn't really intend, but that came from that.
The point is, use those incredible resources that are out there. I think people will spend way too much time trying to write and develop material.
Yeah.
We don't need to reinvent the wheel.
Right.
Catholicism isn't about reinventing the wheel.
Yeah.
Find those resources that are appropriate for the groups of people you're leading, and then equip others with that. But then it's all of these other intangibles. Do that plus this. You have a really strong formula to equip others, especially if they're inexperienced, to give talks.
Yeah. Is there a place, Ryan, where you will be providing any of these points written down, or somewhere that your listeners can access?
Yeah, I'll put together a little cheat sheet and link it in the show notes if people want to check it out.
I love it. That's great. Well, hey, if you found this episode helpful, reach out to Ryan, shoot him a DM, drop him an email. I'm also going to say I would love to hear, maybe you should also share with Ryan, if you have a glory story or a horror story of prepping someone for a talk, and either it went super well and there's amazing fruit that came from it in your ministry, or it went terribly and it now is a fun story to share later. Hit Ryan up, let him know. Be fun.
RyanO'Hara.org/betterpreach, or on Instagram. Yeah, reach out.
Awesome. Well, thanks for listening, everybody.
Peace. If this podcast has been helpful to you, please share a written review and a rating on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Big shout out to my podcasting production partner, David Vessel. Thanks for making this look and sound so good. And to all of you, you have millions of choices when you podcast. Thanks for press and play today. See you next time.